Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. In Missouri, the vast majority of school boards consist of 7 members. They have no term limits, and most serve a 3-year term for no pay. According to the Missouri School Board Association, the most important responsibility of the school board is to work with their communities to improve student achievement. The board serves as a bridge between the community and professional educators. The MSBA believes school boards derive their power and authority from the state, and the board must establish policies and regulations in compliance with state and federal laws. Our guest today is Gretchen Logue, co-editor of the Missouri Education Watchdog and co-founder of the Missouri Coalition Against Common Core. Ms. Logue believes local school boards have had their sovereignty replaced by state and federal regulations. Her website states school districts must adhere to federal and state mandates, but these policies tend to eradicate local autonomy. She warns parents to keep an eye on the State School Board Association, a private association which exists on tax dollars. She writes, "You might find, as we are discovering in Missouri, that these associations are not there to protect taxpayers, but rather to seek to control local school board members." Today we're going to talk about the power of control over local school boards. Gretchen Logue, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you, Lee.
So you've been studying this a while, have you?
I have.
And you have found, let's just cut right to it, because you and I had this conversation and you said the most interesting thing to me. So I'd like to start right there, which is you said to me that school board members are more and more being trained to be subservient to their employee, the superintendent of schools.
Yes, I have been in contact with several school board members throughout the state. It's pretty much the same story. That they, well, let me go back. In 1993, there was the Outstanding School Act. That established...
Is that in Missouri?
In Missouri, yes. And that was outcome-based education. Up until that time, school boards were fairly autonomous in what they could do. 1993, then they had to have outcomes established, and the question that Peter Kinder asked in 1995 in an editorial, he was a state senator at the time, was who are these outcomes, who's determining what the outcomes are?
I was going to ask the same question just now. I mean, outcome-based education.
Outcome-based education.
I could have sworn that when I was a kid, the outcome-based was, can you add, subtract, multiply, divide? Can you create an English sentence that makes sense? Can you write a story? Mm-hmm. Can you look at a map and understand geography?
Mm-hmm. And that was established by your local school board. Each school.
Well, it's actually established by my mom and dad.
Well, they had pretty basic standards. Now what's happened is that, and as Kinder said in '95, the state board now is going to be establishing if a school is reaching the outcome-based goals that the state board determines a child should have. So let's morph into 2016. It's now what the federal government has decided what the outcome must be, that the state board says, okay, that's right, and then the school district is supposed to guide its policies, which are written primarily by MSBA.
That's the Missouri School Board Association.
Missouri School Board Association. So your school board... And
that's, you said, that's a private company. That's,
yes.
Or an association. It's not like an actual arm of government.
No, it is a private organization according to the 990, their tax document that's on the internet. that you can access. The last one is for 2013. It's over a $5 million organization that is supported by your tax dollars. There are two different types of funding that a school district can give MSBA. You have a basic membership, which is formulated on the expenses that your district has, that's supplied to DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And then there's another policy that you can buy, and then they give you the policy updates, and they tell you what policy your school district should adopt to align yourself to state and federal laws.
Pause for just a minute. Where is it that we're hearing about math, geography, English reading, English writing, the basics? Where is this? I hear policies. I hear that kids are being trained in political philosophies, but I'm missing the part about basic knowledge.
MSBA will tell you that the local curriculum is decided on the district level. In theory, that's true. But of course, as you and I talked 4 or 5 years ago about the Common Core and how the curriculum has to be aligned to the Common Core, or whatever the state standards are called, whatever they want to rename them, the curriculum has to align to those standards. There's also a lot of, and we'll touch on it today, there's also a lot of data that's being gathered on the kids and their assessments. So it has to be pretty standardized. So you better be sure that your curriculum matches that. So while theoretically you have a lot of control over the curriculum better match the assessments. And the assessments are set by the state.
You say better match. What happens if they don't?
There's always that carrot and stick that everybody in government-ese likes to talk about, and No Child Left Behind was one of them, is that in order to get the carrots, which is your monetary, your funding from the federal government or the state, the stick is that you better do what we tell you, or we're going to take away your money. All districts, everybody's in a budgetary crunch now. They're worried about money being taken away. So they're going to go ahead and do what the state tells them to do, and the state doesn't really tell you what to do, but they strongly suggest that you do that, or you will get points taken off on your accreditation on the Missouri School Improvement Project called MSEP.
Now, my
Plan,
understanding of funding is that most money comes from property taxes. Again, people don't seem to understand that most of the money that they pay on their house or business property tax goes to the school districts, like somewhere between 60 and 70%. So you're talking millions and millions of dollars are there. And then the state kicks in some money, and then the federal government is just a teeny little bit. And you're saying this teeny little bit that the school boards are still fighting for, and that they're willing to change their entire curriculum to get this this extra few bucks?
Well, let's take my school district, Kirkwood School District.
Okay.
90% of our funding comes from local property tax, which is extremely high. 7% is from the state, and 2% is from the federal government. However, you and I talked about this previously. Superintendents have been trained to apply for grants, or for, if there's money out there, then they go for it. That's just how they're trained to do. I would like to see a study saying, okay, how many people do we have on the payroll that have to fill out the forms for the federal grants, for the state grants? If we say, no, we don't want that 9% of the money, and we're going to do what we think is best for kids in the Kirkwood School District, would we save money? I don't know. I'd like to see a study with that. But there's just something that has been ingrained, probably from MSBA, from the Superintendent's Association, from DESE, is that this is what you have to do. And that is what parents, we get calls from parents. Well, one of the Ann and I, who is the co-editor with me on the Missouri Education Watchdog, a couple years ago, we kept getting calls from parents saying, if my child misses more than 5 days of school, I have to provide a doctor's note, even if the child has an A average. I have to provide a doctor's note for an excused absence, and if I don't get that, I can be hauled in front of Division for Family Services, DFS. And we were hearing from kids, from parents, from kids from all different districts throughout Missouri. So you know this is not just a local policy. Mm-hmm. This is happening in the state. So what this is all about, it's the 95% attendance rate. That was through No Child Left Behind, and now it's in the ESA, Every Student Succeeds Act. That's replaced No Child Left Behind. They strongly suggest that you have a 95% attendance rate because that shows good social emotional learning, and if there's a problem with a child not attending school, regardless of what the child's average is, there may be a problem in the family, and the school has to determine what the problem is.
Wait, why?
Because that's one of the outcomes that they want to be able to tag you on a data set that you are attending school, you are doing this, and it's these arbitrary measures, and it's to determine if the school is making good use of their resources. And the schools will get dinged if their attendance rate goes down, they get less money. So they want to keep the attendance rate up. It's not so much for the learning aspect for the child. And it really doesn't make sense if, as I said, if the child has an A+ average, that's not the issue. The issue is the child missing a certain amount of school.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you saying is that there's some agenda here other than actually educating, because you're saying kids who are getting A's, if they're not in school, all of a sudden the parents are in trouble. And if all of them were getting A's, you know, then they weren't coming to school, there'd still be trouble. And there seems to be some social agenda here as to why, at least that's what you're saying. But I remember when I was back in high school, I graduated out of a class of 1,000 students, which is a lot, of which I think somewhere between 50 and 100 were National Merit Scholars. We didn't have, I mean, we learned those things I've been talking about, math, science, social studies, you know, the basics, and the school was designed to be a place where professional teachers would pass their information along. I don't remember there being a whole bunch of societal-based thought processes being placed into our school. Maybe I was too young to understand it, but I don't remember it being all that important. I do remember when, let's see, I remember the very first Earth Day. Mm-hmm. I remember all the SDS, Students for Democratic Society, invading our school and wanting people to go out on the streets. Mm-hmm. I do remember stuff like that. But basically, you know, at my school, we were about education, and the parents, that's what they were interested in, is having an educated student.
Well, what I would like to challenge parents to do is look at the current state of educational reform. And if you start reading enough blogs, PR releases from ed reform organizations such as the Fordham Institute, Department of Education website is a perfect place to, as your governmental website. Education has moved from academic achievement to equity. And I picked this.
What do you mean by that?
Equity and outcome. It's not equity and opportunity. Everything is equitable. Everything has to be equitable. There was a great YouTube video out a few years ago from one of the ed reform organizations, and it has all different kinds of kids from different racial backgrounds, the same age. I'd say they were 6th, 7th grade, and they're at a starting line. And they're all looking at each other, and they're all excited. And the end of the YouTube video is that everybody is crossing the finish line at the same time. So that's the goal, is to get everybody at the same goal at the same time. So if you have a gifted child, that child has to be held back. If you have a child with special needs, that child is expected to try to get as close to that goal as possible. There is little out there in these sites that talk about academic achievement. That is not emphasized. So we are looking at a social structure in education now. I went to a Kirkwood meeting last Tuesday, and it was about increasing student achievement and opportunity. And I'm still trying to get a copy of the presentation. I promise that I will get it by the end of this week. But they had these slides up there, and you can, and this has been happening in other states. It's called a data wall. Now this is in a teacher resource room or a room that is not accessible to the general public. But there is a data wall with every child listed, and it has little pieces of paper, and it has all their testing and all their data, and there was a big emphasis from this particular administrator that a lot of it was the social, emotional learning aspect of what was going on with that child. And she had different interventions from level 1 to level 6. And all the interventions that would be able to be done for each child is being data tracked on this data wall.
Well, this sounds like a parent. When did teachers suddenly think that they were the kid's parent?
That's been coming for a while. There is something in an MSBA policy that one of the parents in a district a couple years ago did not want her child answering surveys. There are a lot of surveys now that come through the schools, Missouri included. Every child has a MOSIS number, a Missouri Student Identifier number. And they put that number in and they answer the surveys. So it is personally identifiable. You don't know, so the parents don't know where the information's going. They don't know what it's being used for. And this parent did not feel comfortable with that. So what had come home was a permission slip for your child to be able to use it. She did not sign it. She then found out that her child was taking the surveys online. So she asked the school what it was, what was happening there. And they produced an MSBA policy. All these policies are copyrighted to the MSBA. If you look on your board doc, which is what most school districts use, and they put the policies on, it says that a superintendent or designee can give permission if a parent does not. And that a student has no expectation of any privacy for information that they put on the computer. Mm-hmm. So it has been probably a slow process from the time that my child was in school to what it is today. But parents need to know this is an MSBA policy, that it really doesn't matter if you don't want your child to do it. The superintendent can overrule what you say in the interest of the school. It's not necessarily the interest of the child. And that's been the shift. The system is protecting the system. It's not protecting the child, nor is it protecting the parent.
Okay, well, in an investor in society, usually investors have some say over how their money is being spent. The parents of the investors, because they're the ones who are putting the money in through their property tax into the school system. That's what pays the superintendent, that's what pays the teachers. You're saying in your district that you're only getting, like, what was it, 7 or 9% of the money from outside of the district.
Correct.
Say even 10%. Okay, so it's a 90-10. So you would think that the people who are doing the paying would be the ones who would be in charge. But you're saying that that's not the case at all, that parents have little, if any, say whatsoever, and that school board members who are elected by the parents are trained to be subservient to all these outside rules.
I've had school board members tell me, we are trained to do whatever the superintendent tells us to do. And that's a shift, because it used to be that the school board told the school board hires the superintendent.
Right.
But it seems like
Well,
what's
usually an
happened,
employee takes directions from the people
Yes.
who hire the employee.
that's
But you're saying the employee now instructs and directs the employer.
correct. And in fact, there is an MSBA policy out now that several school districts have adopted, and you can find them on the internet, you can find them on the board docs, that, and one thing that is very frightening to me is that they had a policy that they suggested school board members sign that gave the superintendent the authority to apply directly for federal grants. He or she does not need the school board approval, does not need to run it by the school board, even tell them that he or she is going to do that. Well, if you think about what that is going to do, you have this federal grant, which, as you know, the federal grant usually is only partially funded, and the grant may go through several years, but you may only get funding for 2 years. Maybe it's a 5-year program. Where is that
So the
extra
parents are
funding?
stuck for the
parents
other
are
3
stuck,
years.
and they've never voted for it. And the school board is totally cut out of the process. And this is a policy that MSBA is promoting.
Okay, well, let's get serious now. The reason, you and I both know this, the reason why this kind of stuff is going on is because parents aren't paying any attention. If they were to pay attention, if they were to show up, I mean, I am an election supervisor during elections, and I remember one of those elections when a school board was being elected, that we had at my polling station for an entire day, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., 57 people showed up to vote. Now, that's unusually low, but out of 1,800, 300 is considered a lot.
Right.
And it's usually never anywhere near 300. It's usually somewhere between 150 to 250, somewhere in there. So most people have really just stood back. They've just, they've allowed a handful of people to pick out school board members. Then they don't show up at any of the meetings. And of course, people who are undirected by the public will do what they want.
Well, you have a couple problems. Number one is that parents have their children, generally, if you're a parent and your child is in the system, you're busy with that child. You also don't want to cause too much problems in your child's school.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you hate to be oppositional to your school administration, because I've heard parents say, I'm afraid they're going to take it out on my kids. It may not be an overt sort of thing, but you have to step back a little bit. Older people that don't have children in the district or have grandchildren tend to get more involved. They have more time. School board meetings, you're allowed generally you're allowed 3 minutes to say something before the meeting. There's no response from the board. Very few boards have public meetings. And I have heard so many people say, when I go to a school board member and talk about my concerns, and they'll say, well, you're the only one that's ever brought that up. Well, when they finally get the courage to talk to other parents, they find that no, they're not the only one, but it's kind of like this conquer and divide. One school board member told me that an MSBA official in training, took them aside, him or her aside, I'm not going to say whether it's a him or her, and the school board member said, I was elected by my community to represent them. And she said, no, you aren't. You are to be directed by your superintendent and to support him. So I think that the only time that people pay attention to their school board, if an egregious policy comes, what people think is egregious, say for instance the transgendered bathroom bill in Hillsborough, that created a lot of controversy, or when you have a tax increase that's voted down. So until you get something that...
Oh, there you go. See, money.
Yeah, it's money.
Money.
That's the big motivator.
Money gets these... Now, we're down to about 3 minutes left here. So I'll let you take it from here as to what you want to talk about in this last 3 minutes. But it's right there. It's money. That gets these superintendents' attention when they can't do what they want to do because the public won't give them the money.
It's the money, and I would like school boards to be honest and say a lot of the money that we're having to spend, it's mandated. It's mandated by federal law or state law, but they won't tell people that. Number two, if MSBA, if you're going to have an organization like MSBA, then it should represent school board members. And it should represent the school board members who the parents are talking to. And the one thing that I did want to talk about today that we didn't get to really touch on was that it's MSBA is under the National School Board Association. They put out a paper in 2014 and they told school districts, you better have a chief privacy officer and you better have an attorney on staff, because if and when there is a data breach, your school district will be responsible and liable for that. In none of the board docs that I can find through MSBA is there any mention of any school district doing that. There's no chief privacy officer listed or data privacy. So your school boards, or one school board in Missouri at some point is going to have a big lawsuit when all this data from this data wall and from the computerized data gets breached. That's where they can be helpful. There's no mention of it anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's social emotional learning. I've been to state board meetings. They've talked about counselors that are very worried about the type of diagnoses they're supposed to be making on children.
They're not doctors.
Exactly.
And they're not parents.
And
they're not their parents.
Yeah, and can a parent go in and even look at the data and say, no, this is not true, because this is a data set that will be following your child. That's what MSBA, in my mind, should be doing.
Yeah, well, we're just about out of time. So that's why we're having this conversation. It's because I was so startled by some of the things that you had to say that I just wanted what you had to say to be aired publicly so that the public knows that these kind of things are going on, that their school board is not in control of the curriculum, that the school board is told to be under the supervision of its employee, the superintendent, and that everything seems to be, as we used to call it, bass-ackwards. And it's just crazy. Thank you very much for being with us
Thank
today.
you, Lee.
And I've been speaking with Gretchen Logue. She has a lot of training and a lot of credentials to be talking about the things that she's talking to you today about. You really ought to pay attention. Pick somebody out that you want to be on the school board, somebody that you trust, and go and get them elected. This is going to be uploaded to YouTube so that you can show your friends. Just go to Conversation with Lee Presser and Gretchen Logue. Thank you. Goodbye.